Welcome back to another episode of Energy Bites. We are here with Mr. Robert Nealon, Bobby Nealon. Our guest today is Liz Dennett. She's currently the CTO at Cemvita. Also has some really great prior experience to that I'm sure we'll dive into here in a minute. But Liz, just tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you kind of get here today? Where'd you grow up? What was your kind of journey into the data energy tech space?
Well, how long do we have?
Yeah.
So I grew up in a little town in Alaska, like the kind of place where when I grew up, we did not have paved roads. We did not have internet. We did not have cable TV.
Or grocery stores.
Right? Or grocery stores we were talking about. Like the protein we ate was fish that we caught. And a lot of our vegetables were things that we grew. It was a very different place to grow up. And I always lead with this because when I ask people like who they are, what are you, it's really easy for people to lead with a job title, which is awesome now. I have a great flashy job title. It's my dream job. I love it so much. But at my core, I'm not a job title. I'm a builder. I'm a roll my sleeves up, learn how to do stuff builder. That has been a common theme throughout my life ever since high school. Fun fact, I was voted most likely to get away with anything in my high school class in the early 2000s. Not because I was really going out full force against the man, although spoiler alert, I did have purple hair. I played bass in a punk band and awesome. Was a little bit of a handful. So not much has actually changed aside from I can no longer pick up a bass and rock a sweet riff. So grew up in rural Alaska. These days, I lead our technology development and deployment at Cemvita, where we lead nature-inspired biosolutions for a carbon-neutral future. I will talk at length what that looks like. Spoiler alert, it involves microbes. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into DNA and microbes that maybe you thought we'd be signing up to. So we'll talk about genetic sequences in addition to the zeros and ones of the cloud. In my career, I've had some amazing roles. I was a geologist at Hess after my PhD, which happens to be in astrobiology. I worked for NASA looking at how life evolved on early Earth as a proxy for life on Mars. At Hess, the geologist, worked at Biota, where we were pioneering genomics in the energy space, did some time at AWS on energy data platforms, where I worked with energy companies all over the world trying to get their data into the cloud so that they could use really fun things like AI and ML to really optimize their workflows. Prior to this, I was VP of data architecture and data engineering at Wood Mackenzie. I had an amazing team in Scotland, and I've been with Cemvita for a month now.
Crazy.
So there's a lot to unpack in there.
Yeah, no, a ton.
But if you ask me for one sentence, who I am, what I do, what we do at Cemvita, we're builders.
Build cool shit.
We build cool shit.
Yeah. No, find solutions, build it, make it happen. Yeah.
I mean, and that goes into things we'll talk about in terms of formal technology training. My degree is not in computer science.
Yeah.
And really some of the best technologists and people that are making the biggest impact in the energy space do not have formal degrees in computer science. They're builders.
I mean, I think one thing maybe we'll get into later on it too is like, I'm interested because like, I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around it is like the type of education, like you grew up in a rural area, but like, is it almost better for kids, even in this era of AI, to like not even touch it yet and like learn how to just like do things and be creative with like sticks and stones almost, and then like they can probably pick that up? Or is it just better get this tech in their hands early? And you know,
I don't have kids. I have no idea. So I think in many ways that makes it so much easier for me to be like,
well, no, I mean, I think it's a bigger,
let me tell you, absolutely
a bigger question, like higher education or just education in general. Like, you know, it's like,
I will say that in my own life, unstructured time, like, I don't know if you guys have found yourself recently on an airplane. This was brutal in COVID where I didn't have any of that unstructured downtime because I was trying really hard to keep the existential dread from crawling in. You know, like the Tiger King, the sourdough bread baking, everything is fine. Everything is fine. And the time that I find myself really missing is that time when you're on an airplane seat and the Wi-Fi is unexpectedly broken. And it's like you and your laptop and you just have to sit and think. And to me, that's the equivalent of like being a kid with sticks and stones in the backyard. My parents were the parents that are like, all right, it is 9 a.m. Go in the backyard. We'll see you for lunch and we'll see you for dinner. And I think there's a sense of independence and just fix it that comes with that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's, for a lot of people that I know, I'm right there with you as far as just like solving problems and making stuff better, more efficient, automated, whatever it may be, right? Just like the core of a lot of, I feel like the energy industry is, we love solving problems and there's incredible problems to be solved, which is what, for me, you know, I'm a mechanical engineer that had no exposure to oil field until my last semester of college. And I was like, I didn't know anything about it. And then I started getting into it. I had this internship. I was like, holy shit, there's all this amazing stuff to learn. There's all these incredible challenges, and it's logistically complex and it's global. And there's so many things that are into it that I completely agree with you. Just that ability to, like, you don't have someone there holding your hand when you're outside playing and something breaks or like whatever, right? Like you just figure out ways to fix it, right?
And I remember one of the step changes is I was at an unnamed job and I had just been promoted. I was my first like proper leadership role. I was a manager of managers, and I was used to operating really tactically, where I'll just put out fires, I'll get stuff done. Like my first gut response is typically the quickest. And I had to be coached a lot of times. Like, hey, Liz, think about the broader implications, spend time really defining the problem, to your point. And I remember, because I like to solve things tactically, in my calendar, I built in like my deep thinking time, shut the door, find a quiet place, have your critical deep thinking time. And at the time it was really hokey, but that's your shower time. That's your windshield time. That's the time you got to make space for, because if you're not defining the problems accurately, it's really easy to jump to the solutions. It's so easy to say, yeah, we'll throw AI ML at this.
Yeah.
We'll solve the problem here, but you don't even know what the problem is.
Right. Yeah. No, it's very, very true. Well, and especially as we just talked about, like the complexity of and the risks associated with a lot of energy stuff are very different than the risks with a lot of other things, right? And so like it's a much more, to your point, it's a very high, there's a lot more things that go into it than how do we solve the problem? Because it's well, what is the problem, to your point? What are the risks associated with X, Y, and Z solutions, and all of the kind of downstream pieces of that?
Yeah, I'm big on like second order effects. Like, are we solving the symptom or the cause, all that stuff?
Well, there's so much, and then you have human psychology that plays into all of that too in the oil field, depending on where you're at, and if you've got field folk, like how things get communicated down,
but then, but then Bubba's got to use it. You know, like,
and I mean, the reality with the energy space is I should check my bias here. My dad was a directional driller on the North Slope. Mm-hmm. So I grew up hearing stories about this. I swore I'd never become a geologist because of this. I took rocks for jocks because it was like the easy science course. Yeah. Even though as a high schooler, I took like AP calculus when I was a sophomore and like did great. But I was like, I don't know if I'm good at science. I want the easy stuff. And long story short, I ended up being much better at science and math than I ever gave myself credit for. But that had always been a part of my ethos. And when you grow up hearing those stories, you actually realize that the people that are up there on the North Slope drilling wells have incredible skills. They have mechanical awareness. My dad can fix anything. Mm-hmm. He is the OG builder. Yeah. And so there are some incredibly talented and smart people. And when I say smart, I'm talking about all kinds of intelligence, not just book smart, not just people smart, but there's some great charismatic people smart people up there too. So we have some of the best talent that has been working in the energy space, the energy transition, on all aspects of the energy space. And they haven't solved a lot of these problems. They haven't gotten all their data to be analyzed in the same way. Therefore, it's probably not going to be solved by someone trying to do stuff the same way.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, because even I think I saw, shout out to another podcast. I think Matt Harriman had his, and they're just talking about how, we're actually technology-wise, we can land wells, 2 miles deep and over in a 10-foot window. But then, I mean, really, you look back on the data side, we don't really have our stuff in order nearly as much as they do on the physical side of it, so.
The analogy I would always use when I was at Hess is my office was like up on, the 10th floor. And it was the equivalent of taking a soda straw diameter, going all the way up there and landing it on something the size of your cell phone. Yeah. That's the technology and the skill we have. Yeah, there's a cone of uncertainty. Yeah, there's stuff we don't know, but it's so advanced. And then when it comes time to be like, cool, let's look at the well logs. Let's see if we can digitize them. Oh shit, I got to go to the library and dust off the paper well logs, or these are raster images. Yeah. And that's a lot of actually what propelled me to join the team at AWS when they were really making some great moves to the cloud to bring energy companies up to speed. Yeah. But the reality is energy data is unique and it is a whole different monster. Yeah. And if you're coming in from the outside, you don't understand that we are spanning temporal generations. We have digitally native data now. We're getting WITS-ML data in real time. We have these raster logs that we're talking about. We have old school logs from the first
Paper
wells that were
logs with
drilled like in
pencils.
Beaumont.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And eventually I want to have like Brian McDowell on, and he's like literally trying to digitize all the old stuff. Like,
so we have all these generations. The tools have changed. The quality has changed. That's time. We also have space. We are dealing with information all across the world, and it's 3D data.
Yep.
We have to account for the surface hole locations, the bottom hole locations. Sometimes they're workovers, sometimes they're recompletions. There's so much complexity with their data. And something that people also don't appreciate is that a lot of it is not an actual physical measurement. It is interpreted. So even if it's something like a gamma ray log, that is not a direct measurement of your shale concentration.
Right.
So it's not something like Project Gutenberg where you're able to say, you know what, I'm going to use optical character recognition and I'm going to figure out what these words mean. And I'm going to be really clever. If I don't know the words, I'm going to invent CAPTCHAs and crowdsource. Fine, if you're listening and you're like, I don't know what that means, Google it. It's wonderful crowdsourcing. And it's also not like Spotify where you can use things like waveform analysis to put together bins of music because we don't have 1 or 2 or 3 dimensions. We can't use principal coordinate analysis. This is beyond multiple dimensions. And that level of complexity, you can't get unless you really grow up in that space, literally or metaphorically.
Yeah.
No,
I'll get off my energy soapbox now.
No, I love
it. It's awesome. Keep riffing. It's great.
I'm right there with you. Let me ask you this. So when do you think was how did you get into technology? Like when, as a kid growing up, did you mess with computers? Were you taking stuff apart? Was it later in life?
It was, I always have, I guess, 2 versions. One where I didn't formally get like AWS certifications and cloud certifications until later, but looking back, like I just assumed these were things that every person did. Like, of course, my dad taught me how to program BASIC at a young age. Of course, when I was in 7th grade, instead of going to drama camp, I went to C++ camp. Like, I wasn't good at it, but of course you understand the different kinds of loops. And there's just a logic.
Yeah, it's the logic piece, right? Like,
because once you know fundamental programming, like,
exactly.
stuff, like you move from one to the next, and what's, the control flow and all that stuff.
I'm like, do not get me wrong. I am not a great engineer. I'm not a great programmer. That is not my superpower. But if you can kind of grok it and understand it, and to the point, if you ever, I guess, you have that basis. If I'd love to hear your guys on this. If you've ever had a conversation or typed out something and you're like, if then
you just writing
or use that like in
emails.
normal conversation, and someone's been like, oh, haha, funny joke, and you're like, yes, that was said ironically, not just part of my normal vernacular.
You know you're real if you use case when in conversation.
Exactly. So I guess probably I'm so into the weeds there, I didn't even notice it was atypical.
No, I mean I was exposed to like programming in I think middle school through school, right? And I fell in love with the logic part of it. I was right there with you. Like I was never. Bobby knows this because I ask him coding questions all the time. I'm not.
Have you tried asking ChatGPT your coding questions?
He was like early adopter.
Freaking life changing.
Been doing that for a while.
Life changing.
Using it to document my code as well because it will document my code.
And GitHub Copilot. I don't know if you're actually putting your fingers on the keyboard yet, but
so good.
Yeah, and so, but it's one of those things. It's like once you understand, like my brain is just very logical to a fault at times, but like code is just logic, right? And but I think that's such a unique thing to have because there's that gap between the highly technical folks that can code anything and everything that are, all the way down into building their own AI stuff. And then the business side where like they have no idea what these guys are talking about, but they know they have all these problems. And so if you can just understand, hey, this is how code is written and built and all this stuff. And then you can understand like, okay, this is what GitHub is and repos. And, we can put this repo together with this, and then this can be hosted on the cloud and we can do all these things. You start really seeing like all the potential of what technology can really bring.
Absolutely.
Our accounting managers call it the art of the possible. Like, right?
That's such an AWS term too.
Art
of the possible. Yeah.
So you got into coding in middle school-ish, it sounds like?
Yeah. And like, I still use it for fun.
Yeah.
Probably more than I'd like to admit. I still use it.
It's good. It's a good
fun and entertainment.
Well, it's like we were talking about the, that downtime, the brain time that you need. To me, that's a very like therapeutic, like that's all I'm focusing on. There's nothing else going on. And a lot of the time I can't get up until I like get
Who
to that
doesn't love a
stopping part.
hyperfixation moment?
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't love a
my wife and kids
Yeah.
at 4:00 on a Tuesday?
like cancel all my weekend plans? I need to figure out
No, I
this
mean,
one
but for
thing.
me, like you could do that into the evening. Like sometimes when everyone goes to bed, then you get working on it. You just get in that zone. You're just like in it, and I think there's comfort in logic too. Just like for me, like if it's throwing a bug, like I know that I'm doing something wrong. Like because I'm giving it instructions and it's doing those instructions. And so
the thrill of victory when you like it's the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory. I remember I was in San Diego doing something and I was in a Phil's coffee shop and I couldn't figure out, it was like an OAuth 2 issue because I was using a Google Colab notebook and it was taking forever. And I was pounding my head into it and I finally got it. And I was just like,
yes.
And everyone turned to me and I felt like, honestly, I felt like such a hacker in that moment. I had all these terminal screens up and I was like, I got this. It's Southern California. So people were probably like, I can help you. But
like,
I felt very cool.
No, that's one of the reasons I didn't get into development is because my patience a lot of the time it's just not there for it. But yeah, like it's the best analogy for me is like, it's very much like golf. Cause it's like, you can go hit a bunch of really crappy shots and then you come up and you randomly hit a great one. Yeah. You're like, man, I'm so good at this. You know?
I'm not a golfer. I'm an Olympic weightlifter. I did that for a while. And like, you can dial in the form on your snatch and clean and jerk and you can have off days. And then some days you'll go and it will feel effortless and it will just dial in.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm told. I haven't had that many effortless days in either of those, but I keep chasing that high.
Yeah, no, it's
One
true.
day.
Though. It's this big emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, no, there was like actually I responded to today because I kind of had one of those moments last night. I was working on something for an old client that I'd worked with, but it was actually updating a Spotfire server. And I was ramming my head through a wall like all night, but like, I was like, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get through it. And then like, 11:30, like, yes, I got it. And this morning I was able to tell the guy it was working and but the tweet one guy had was like, they were talking about moats or whatever, startups and moats. And he's like, my moat is that I will ram my head into a wall as, long as I need to get something done. Longer than any reasonable person would do. And like, that checks out pretty much.
Or like spend too long engineering something so that you'll automate it. So you'll save minimal amounts of time moving forward.
I think there's a pretty good XCDR.
Yeah, there's an XKCD about that.
Yeah, XKCD, that's what
I've gotten a lot better about that. And I have to in my role. I'm the person coming in, telling my team like, all right, guys, I see you're working on that Python, ask ChatGPT. And that's actually a big transition coming at it from academia and I actually just wrote my first Medium article series about this.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, I read that. Remember talking about that. Yeah.
One of the big challenges, like coming out of academia, you value the journey. And a lot of times while you're learning something new, you value the journey, you have to. But in my role now, it's like, all right, if we can shave 50 times off of this, Google it, ask ChatGPT, make it faster. You can still get the thrill of victory.
Well, it's like one of those like if you've hired them, like they've checked out like on their skills, right? Now it's like let's amplify those skills.
Let's take it to the next level.
Copilot or GPT, those are code, pair programming, that you don't have to pay for. No, it's not super cool. So then all right, so middle school, whatever you got through. So did you use any coding like in undergrad, grad school?
I did in grad school. I did a subsurface biogeochemical modeling class. We used a lot of VBA to calculate nutrient flux in the subsurface.
Was it VBA in like Excel or
Excel 2003? Which at the time was incredibly modern.
I had to learn how to code calculus on VBA in undergrad.
These were all partial differential equations. Yeah,
exactly.
Fun fact about me: I have 2 tattoos. They're both math symbols.
Which ones?
Maybe we'll save that for later in the lightning round. So we did a lot of that, which was actually really funny because in high school, and they're like, you'll never use calculus again, but you got to know it. I was like, false, guys. I'm using calculus. I've since then used partial differentials a few other times in my life. So that came full circle. Also, we were at that point, we were calculating nutrient flux, oxidant flux, and I have a dog named Flux. So if I've not established myself with my nerd credentials yet, I think I just did.
I love that.
Use that in grad school too. It was a lot of automation and a lot of doing stuff with data.
Yeah.
If I could do it all differently, and if I could just put it into a database and use Python, life would be so fundamentally different now. But I didn't know.
No, I feel like
you don't know. I mean,
I honestly feel like that's a lot of people's journey into the kind of tech stack and coding. Is it's like, like at least that's kind of my experience, right? It's like when we were at RDS, we're dealing with high frequency, 1 second IoT
Yeah.
sensor data. And it's like, well, shit. Okay. You do 1 second for a month
Stacks up
recording a
pretty quick,
DFIT or
Yeah.
a PTA, and you
Yeah.
can't open it in Excel. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I
And
need
then
to
you
just
have to, like,
visualize this, right?
learn about relational versus non-relational databases,
Yep.
which really is a gateway drug. Like, you
Yeah.
start with Excel, you start with Python. Next thing you know, you're like, all right, Rust.
Yeah.
All right,
Hello,
Go.
friend.
Let's see what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. You start with like, how can I get this in a relational database? Next thing you know, you're like eyeballs deep in an RDS instance in
Yeah.
AWS, hooking it up to like a SageMaker endpoint, and
Yeah.
it's just game on.
No,
Yeah.
Game on.
It's, I feel like a lot of people, it's the problem that they were trying to solve is the source that led them into data technology
Yeah.
coding, so to speak. What, let's talk a little bit about kind of the energy tech stack, not necessarily specifically at one company or another, but just over your career, kind of how you've seen it evolve and some of the interesting things you've kind of seen.
Yeah. So,
Because you've got a lot of your experience is biochemical,
it's all over the
geological,
place.
right? Like, and so that's a whole nother
You
like,
probably
aspect.
you probably saw a lot of, like, especially at AWS.
I've seen
and even,
so much stuff.
yeah.
I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And even now, I mean, we're at Cemvita, we're a startup. We're under 100 people right
Yeah.
now. We have a cloud footprint. We're all in on AWS, not to spoil which tech stack we're using. And we're trying to figure out, and we're successfully taking the DNA pieces and the biology. We have what I like to call the Indiana Jones of microbial bio prospecting people, which is actually great. It's a segue, definitely worth getting into. But the question is, how do you couple like these academic best practices, finding new microbes, domesticating the microbes, getting as much data as possible, scaling them up in an industrial biotechnology place where you have sensor data coming in every second or every minute. We have genomic data. We have protein and lipid data. How do you get all that together, minimizing your technical debt and getting it together in a way that actually leads to additional IP and doesn't just create a bunch of Excel files somewhere that no one can do anything with? Well, you're sharing knowledge. And it's a startup, so you're always building the plane as you're flying it. We also have 3 different business lines, so we're optimizing 3 different routes to commercialization. And the truth is how we're doing that. Those lessons are abso-freaking-lutely best practices that I shamelessly have co-opted from my time at AWS, my time at Biota, my time at Hess, my time at WoodMac. So there's a few general best practices, things like building with future possibility in mind, things like security is always job zero. Shameless shout out. I'm very big on locking your computers when you walk away. The first week in the job, people were not doing that. So I sketched out a very sad looking emo unicorn. It had like the side black hair, and sent out an email to the company just being like, every time you don't lock your computer, this unicorn gets very sad. And then if your computer was not locked, I went and set it as your desktop wallpaper to publicly shame you.
I was going to say, that's what I
So
would have done.
at AWS, public shaming was one of our love languages. There's a few facts that happen if you work at AWS. One of them is that you have to tell everyone in every conversation you work there. The second one is you have the option to get your favorite leadership principle tattooed. Spoiler alert, I mentioned I didn't have that, but I'm happy to talk about the culture because there are some great things about their culture. And one of the third things around public shaming is they have a lot of great ways to keep the culture growing.
Yeah.
One of them is if you leave your computer unlocked because security is so important, they will reply all to a giant listserv as you, professing your love for things like unicorns.
That's incredible.
Wow.
And there's scoreboards, there's metrics, there's all kinds of things about it. And so in my email, I was like, we're not going to publicly shame like we would at AWS, so the point of that is that things like security are non-negotiable because if you do not have your cloud environment secured, if you do not have your laptops physically secured, no matter what you're doing can all be compromised.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't put it up front, like it's not going to happen. It's just like documentation. Like if you put it off the side, like because you want to start building,
exactly,
and if you don't put it in place, and I've been guilty. I'm not going to act like I'm perfect, but like I know from experience. I just know from the psychology of it, it's like you just want to get busy building.
Exactly.
But if you don't set the proper firewalls and everything in place, like you're never going to go back and do it.
No.
Or it's
two-factor
going to
authentication using root credentials to log in. There's really simple things like that.
Yeah.
So those are some of the best practices. Also thinking about future optionality. thinking about vendor lock-in, thinking about where you can use open source solutions, thinking about how you can include new technologies, especially if they're really fun. Do you want to be an early adopter? Do you not want to be an early adopter? Do you really need a distributed ledger technology here? Do you really need to be thinking about Web3 here?
Probably not.
If you're thinking about it, the answer is probably no.
I mean, one thing I wanted to maybe get into with you, because I mean, I know I did the solutions architect thing that you've really forced me to do, and I appreciate that for you. From you,
Guilty.
but I asked for it. I sought you out when I was working at University of Lansing. Y'all were one floor.
I know
down.
we met and got coffee. That's our origin story for friendship.
But yeah, and then you were like, no, you're gonna go do your.
I pretty much was. I was like, you person that has an interest in technology. Like, quick aside, I think we talked a little bit. Sorry, before we turn the mics on, but we talked a little bit about how we get people that are technically interested and have the skills, but maybe don't have the formal training. Like, how we do that is, if you're listening here, how we hold each other accountable is we hold them accountable. We say, hey, Bobby, hey, friend, you're going to do this and you're going to email me back as soon as you do it. And we're going to celebrate together and you're going to tag me on LinkedIn because energy needs all of our help. And if we see people that have the talent and skills, force them.
No, that's...
And publicly shame them if they don't.
No, absolutely. But no, so I appreciate you for that. But more on a technical side, I mean, AWS or cloud architecture is built, they push the microservices, pretty well. And I'm sure you're aware of recently the Amazon Prime thing that came about. Them,
they got rid of their microservice architecture.
And moved back towards a monolith. And just kind of curious, because now you're looking at maybe building something out, and is how you'll build that at Cemvita different now than when you would have done 2 years ago when you're at AWS? Or, I mean...
So I am a huge fan of pragmatism and being around the block once or twice, especially a lot of the lessons that I learned at Woodmac, coming in very optimistic. Like, we're going to get these brilliant analysts off of Excel. We're going to get them trained up. And then them being like, Liz, we're going to wrestle Excel out of my cold, dead hands. Just being more sensitive around the culture. I think part of that is just a natural journey, becoming more of an executive and less of like a cockeyed optimist who's a freshly minted PhD. In terms of how we execute now, also in this economy, in terms of just getting to commercialization, ruthless prioritization is something that you hear throughout the tech space. So we're going to use a relational database. We're going to use RDS because it's secure. We can encrypt it at rest. We can encrypt it at transit. By using the cloud, any cloud, you can abdicate a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting, so you don't have to do the patching, the maintenance pieces like that, which from a security
100%.
standpoint, keep me awake at night. But I'm honestly not going to obsess about if we're using MariaDB or Postgres.
Right. It's a relational database.
Exactly. Like we probably won't use Oracle just because the licensing terms at scale can be prohibitive, but it's going to depend. And how you make, actually this goes back to AWS principles. One of the leadership principles is one-way doors versus two-way door decisions. And if it's a two-way door decision, something you can do and then come back and undo, make those really quickly. Empower the people to do those. If it's one-way door, essentially there's no take backsies. Really think about that.
It's a good principle.
Yeah.
It's really smart, actually.
Yeah, their AWS's principles are really worth anyone to take a look at.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own favorite ones,
For sure.
but that is absolutely one of my favorites. Another one is bias for action. So if you're ever not sure about what to do, freaking do something.
Right.
Don't just sit there. Like you can do it, you can take it back.
Analysis paralysis is a real thing, especially with engineers and with lots of data.
Yeah.
Guilty of it myself. To that point, talking about the stacks and stuff, what is I read I guess yesterday, I was reading the leaked Google Doc or Google issuance that they put out internally about basically saying that, they are public or not public. They weren't publicly, it was internal, but
it's public now.
It's public now. Yeah. Basically saying that they've lost the AI race. Like the way that they were approaching things was wrong. Just because it's bigger data doesn't mean it's better. Even GPT and like Facebook basically coming out and saying all of these are progressing, but open source is literally eating our lunch.
Yeah.
With just the speed of the development, but also, the size of the models that open source is helping develop and the speed at which those models can be run and just the efficiency of those things. And so but then like they of course kind of close it with a positive, and it's like, well, the beauty of open source is that we also have access to it, so we can plug it into our stuff. And so I'm curious.
Do you think they used an open source program to write that memo?
It wasn't barred.
We were all thinking it.
I can tell you that. But I'm just curious your thoughts, opinion on that, especially having come from, closed source, but, full stack type cloud service to building something from scratch, so to speak, with what you guys have, and what your kind of approach is with open versus just a service.
I love these tools. And also at AWS, I was part of the team doing energy data platforms, the OSDU team, which is an open group, open source initiative. Open source stuff is so tricky.
Yeah,
and there's
I would agree.
hundreds of examples of open source stuff being done very poorly. It gets a bad rap within the community. Typically it's done off volunteer time. And it's actually really refreshing to see open source work done well.
Yeah.
So that is very refreshing. I think in terms of inflection points and step changes with where we are, the availability of tools like ChatGPT to do things like increase the baseline awareness of programming, increase the speed of which we can execute, and take non-value add activities and automate them is just life-changing. I think it's going to be very interesting for someone who consumes a lot of content. When I start to realize how much of this content is written by automated AIs, and then we'll be having AIs distill that content.
Yeah, I mean, they're already doing that.
Just create that cyclical input. An example though of just, I love talking to people about like, what are the 2 or 3 ways that you've saved hours of your life with ChatGPT? If you guys haven't done this and ever have to write a letter of recommendation for someone.
Oh yeah.
Already done it.
Copy paste that resume. It is life-changing. That's a great example. So summarize, love seeing examples of the open source community thrive. I think it's going to be a really interesting inflection point. And it's always a balancing act because the investment required to get any technology to commercialization, whether it's an AI technology, whether it's biotech, whatever it is massive. And it's really easy to talk about the unicorns, the things that have been successful. But the economic climate right now, talking to my friends that are at VCs, for instance, it's going to be a new reality. So I think it's a very interesting dichotomy here.
Yeah. How do you kind of approach the open source versus as a service as y'all kind of develop?
So it depends what it is. I have some good examples. If we need to protect our IP. So for instance, for internal knowledge transfers, one of my big priorities as CTO in the first month has been making sure that we have real high levels of visibility and accountability for how we're doing things like our experimental design. Because we have an incredible team. We have 100 people. Of those, we have over 40 PhDs. We're more than half female. We have 2 different locations. So one thing we've done is spin out an internal wiki page. We're using this for electronic lab notebooks. AWS, we use wikis internally for everything. WoodMac, we had amazing usage of wikis. They're searchable. They can help with IP. They can help with security. There's lots of open source wikis we could use. You can also buy off the shelf wikis that take care of the running, the maintenance, the user. We are going to
constantly adding features, right?
And have integrations with third-party features. We could definitely be part of an open source wiki community, run it ourselves, or we could abdicate that, pay a little bit, and have SLAs around it. So to answer that, if SLAs are important, if you need the durability, the availability, if you need support because it is a core part of your business model, abdicate that. And that's what's cool about open source is that there are companies that have businesses around open source and can take those heavy lifting components and serve them up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, if you're not really in the weeds on tech stacks and just different softwares and stuff, like a lot of people don't realize that like Kafka and Confluent, like there's so many companies out there where it's like, here's the open source version if you want to deal with it yourself, but good luck.
I'm sure you
can
don't.
Pay us.
Like, I have a Confluence coffee cup.
Yeah.
A Confluent coffee cup. Sorry. We're talking about wikis. Confluence is the wiki.
Wiki,
Confluent is the managed Kafka. And I thought I had it for a minute, but we're in the studio. I do not. So normally I'd pick up my coffee cup and be like, speaking of real time, let's talk about CDCs or change data capture. Let's
talk about that.
That's if tech stacks and open source is probably beyond the limits of what someone needs to talk about here.
Yeah, because I'm running up on some CDC issues with very large SQL Server tables right now. It was partition switching is messing everything up, but that's maybe another day.
Yeah, that's an offline conversation.
I want to enjoy this conversation.
Listeners, if you want more on this, slide into either of our DMs and we'll see what we can do.
No, I think it's a good point because especially when you're in a startup or growth phase, right? Speed, like timing and speed is
Time is money.
so
It is our
critical.
single biggest
Yeah.
limited resource. To
Yep.
my point earlier about academics versus people in industry, the one thing you have when you're in grad school is time. If you're
Yeah.
up till 3 a.m. troubleshooting something, that's fine. If you're working for me, I don't want you staying up till
Yeah.
3 a.m. every night troubleshooting things.
No.
Like your time, your sleep,
Yeah.
that is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of, I also like the open source SaaS kind of combos is it's like I can go play with the open source thing, like no risk, see it, feel it
Yup.
out, understand it, and then be like, oh, actually, this is very valuable. And yeah, I'd love to have someone take care of all the shit that I don't want
Exactly.
to do.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
secure and everything.
And like you say
else,
about the
right?
abdicate, I mean, like it's total cost of ownership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Exactly.
yes,
But Bobby,
Python
it's
is
free.
Yeah, it's free until I have to spin up servers or buy
Yeah.
servers to deploy it, and then
Or
I
until
don't
Engineers
patch
are
it,
expensive and really hard to
Yeah.
find that
Or-
can speak energy and do all the computer
Yeah.
things.
And
Or
who can
until
do
the
it.
expert on that leaves.
Can run infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, like keep server rooms up
Mhm.
and have replication and failover. I mean, like all these things that I have no desire to do.
No, none.
Yeah.
None.
So how did your role change, say, from AWS to like WoodMac? Or like, I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like it was different but the same. I mean, obviously you're probably using similar stuff, but like,
Yeah. So it's changed in terms of my career progression has really, honestly, it's been my goal since college, if not grad school, has been to be a CTO of an energy transition startup.
Yeah.
Like I've been wanting to be in the C-suite in a CTO role my entire career. And so working backwards from that, I've been wanting to find roles that have more and more oversight, more strategic decision making, and the ability to just build and execute.
Yeah.
So when I joined WoodMac, I actually was not looking to leave AWS. I was so happy there. We were doing some amazingly cool stuff. It was a very tough decision.
sure, yeah.
I cried. Pretty much everyone I told cried. Definitely a two-way door decision. But I was reached out to by, at the time, our chief data officer at WoodMac, and he was like, hey, we need data architecture. We have no one. There's potentially one person that could be on your team. This team needs to be founded. It needs to grow. And I was like, well, I love a challenge. I love growing stuff from the ground up. And so I met with this one individual. His name's Connor. He ended up helping me found data architecture. He's gone on to do amazing things since then. And it was really just the two of us at the beginning. In that time, the VP of data engineering left, and they reached out to most of the people that worked for him. And we're like, hey, he's leaving. Who do you want to work for? And the vast majority were like, we want to work for Liz. So my role in Remit grew. My team of 1 turned into about a team of 50.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a executive focused role. It was a lot of learning how to play executive politics, learning how to manage up, learning how to read a room. In that time too at WoodMac, when I joined, we were owned by Verisk, which is a NASDAQ 100 company.
Okay.
We got acquired by private equity during that time.
Whole
So it was
nother
managing,
can of
that
worms.
transition.
Gosh, yeah.
I was splitting my time between here and Edinburgh, which
Wow.
was awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
And spending a lot of time in London, but really figuring out what does it mean to take a company of, 1,500, 2,000 people where we have analysts, we have the best and smartest, just people interacting with the data in the energy industry. Like we're the go-to experts for so much stuff. How do we enable them with the data architecture, with the data engineering in a way that doesn't do things like ask them to give up their Excel notebooks?
Right.
No, yeah, 100%.
So it was awesome and really enables the energy transition. A lot of work with real-time energy data. We launched a satellite analytics partnership. It was a strategic partnership with Ball, worked with AWS to amplify that work. Some of the best and smartest people.
So this was more about serving the data out to internal folks at WoodMac so they could do the analysis that they put out, not necessarily a data product that was externally facing.
It served both. So really looking at balancing the simultaneous needs of internal and external customers, while at the same time building a data platform that could meet all those needs, which is real-time data.
Yeah.
It's batch data. It is historical data.
Yeah. And then somehow it's all related and you got to be able to link them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a messy web.
We have a team of data modelers. It started with Connor before he became a data architect. When I left, we had hired 3 or 4 data modelers, and they work within the business units. Connor and I actually worked on putting together this concept called empathetic architecture, which I love because it's not just about saying, all right, here's our architecture diagram, let's do it, but it's about really getting to know the businesses.
Yeah.
And really figuring out, okay, you are using these words, but I don't think they mean to me what they mean to you. And we had really good Scrum teams. We had a really good agile culture. So what does it mean to the product owners? How can we roll this out? It was definitely more of a tech company meets energy company approach.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so even just from a leadership development perspective, I had to grow my leadership skills in a way that I hadn't been challenged to do in that way yet.
That's really awesome.
It was an experience.
Kind of, let's get more into the like modeling and kind of exciting data stuff. That
logical data models, physical data models, conceptual data models.
All of it.
I have some videos on LinkedIn. If anyone's listening and they're like,
no, go
to my LinkedIn.
Seriously.
There's hundreds of videos I've recorded. You can learn about what they mean. Which I'd never been a data modeler. To me, like star schemas, snowflakes, what do these things mean?
Yeah.
How does the data relate? What is data normalization at its core? Which is actually which is really interesting because if you've been working with data, you can grok it. You can understand it when someone explains data normalization. Yeah. But then you learn they have all these words for things that only are these abstract concepts in your head. Data in a format that you can use and getting it served up so it's fit for purpose, and transitioning from we would call it data as an asset, or data as a strategic asset. So it's ready to be used. It's fit for purpose. You don't have to spend the time munging it.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Oh, 100%. Well, that's like all the time, right? People are like, oh yeah, there's an API, so we can integrate with that real easy, right?
Huge eye roll. Huge eye roll.
And Bobby knows very well that I'm the first person to be like, oh yeah, that should be pretty easy. Yeah. Whenever any kind of small dev thing comes up.
Yeah, I think John and I have come full circle on this. Implementing APIs at RDS because that was the cool way to do it.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, database. Give me and now I'm like, can you just like give me the CSV? I mean, like, can we go back to FTP, please? Like,
I wonder if speaking of microservices, I wonder if in like 2 years from now we'll be like, APIs and microservices are so 2022.
Yeah. It's probably, I mean,
monoliths and like scanned pictures
on-prem
of data.
Yeah. Everything is coming full circle.
But now it's passing around Parquet files, right? And, it's like,
Well, I mean,
Parquet
honestly,
files can be magic.
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty sweet.
The more I think about APIs, the more I realize that it's basically just an open source data version, right? It's like, if you want to come in and format and structure and deal with all of our shitty documentation and figure out where this is coming from and what it means, go for it.
When I was first working at AWS, I wanted to get cool stickers for my laptop. There's a big sticker culture there. And I remember someone there had a sticker that said, the cloud is just someone else's computer. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm just thinking now, like, APIs are just making someone else deal with the shitty parts of your data you don't want to.
Hey, we didn't have time to document this or structure it in a logical way, or here's all of it, right?
It's going to nest it all. Yeah. 5 layers deep.
Yeah. That's God.
Tears not included.
It's infuriating. Well, yeah.
Here's a soap API. Have fun.
Or and then building on top of that.
Yeah.
Back to the, it's like, also we're going to change our OAuth every 6 months just to make it even more fun. So once you do get this set up, you have to go fix it. Yep.
Let's talk about fun stuff.
Yeah, right.
No,
but about those CDC issues you were having.
Just keep going down that.
It can't be that bad.
I do want to add, because a lot of, at least my understanding of it, which is incredibly limited. I'm a mechanical engineer because I have to see it and I have to be able to see and touch things.
You're like, I need the ones and the zeros. Show me the binary.
Well, so like, where I'm going with it is biology to me, like chemistry and biology, I hated because I
can see it.
Anyway, we'll agree to disagree there. Come on down to the lab.
We have this industrial scale up facility. Well, it's massive. We'll show you how we're getting.
Concede that I did not have the best experiences or professors around that. But what I wanted to ask is, because a lot of the stuff you've done, whether it's biota or even now, is all tied back to some kind of biology, geochemistry, DNA at some point. How does that, like, what does that data kind of look like? And I'm not asking you to, tell us anything secretive or whatever, but like, how does that process kind of work as far as like, where does that live? What's the structure? How does it look? Like,
I'm going to talk about the Indiana Jones of microbe hunters right now. So our broad tech stack right now, it has some cloud pieces, but if I'm going to talk about what we do, it actually starts with probably 1 foot in the cloud, I think it's fair to say, and the other foot like deep in a mud puddle somewhere where we have freedom to operate harvesting microbes. So we have a bioprospecting team that goes out there to environments and bioprospects or finds these bugs, these single-celled bacteria, and these organisms we take and then we domesticate using a few tools such as adaptive laboratory evolution.
When you say domesticate, I'm going to play like real slow.
Go for it.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so we want them, there's bacteria that exist in nature. They're wild type. They can be a little ruly. They're the wolves of the world. And when we domesticate them, we turn them into dogs.
Got it.
We make sure that they want to eat their kibble. They want to eat their feedstocks. We use a few tools such as synthetic biology and adaptive laboratory evolution. Because if we're trying to do something like take hydrocarbons that exist in an oil and gas reservoir and get microbes that can turn those HC molecules into hydrogen, they need to live at very hot temperatures and in very
specific
salty environments.
Conditions, yeah.
And microbes in the wild, typically you're not used to those.
Don't like that. Yeah.
Or they might be part of the way there. So we have to get them used to living in hotter and hotter environments or saltier and saltier environments.
So is it kind of a hybrid of like genetic engineering and or, to your point, like breeding essentially, right? Like this was a wolf and we bred it down to a chihuahua.
It's going to turn into a pug
like
one day.
Evolution, even like
we'll get flux the doodle out of it eventually. So those are some of the tools. In addition to that, once that's all done, we get like essentially hero microbes. These one little individual microbes that can do certain things. We quantify their DNA, the C's, T's, A's, and G's that make up their genetic sequence. We quantify their lipids and their proteins. All that data goes in the cloud so we can put it alongside things like this is the food they eat, this is what they breathe, this is what they secrete. And then we have to take it from little tiny reactors, which can be a mil or up to 1 liter, and upscale it to things that are thousands of liters, which is actually a pretty challenging process because as a mechanical engineer, I'm sure you can imagine that the processes of which nutrients and oxygen, things like oxygen flow in a small reactor change significantly when you scale up.
All your variables change.
Everything changes. And so we have all those facilities within our lab. And then to keep track of those, we measure the genetics over time. We measure things like lipids over time. And we have computational biology that keeps track of all of that.
That's awesome.
And so all that data goes in the cloud. All of our sensor data we can track in real time so we can see what's happening. And this is essentially our tech stack. We have a few different applications. We have gold hydrogen, which I mentioned, which in the subsurface, we take existing hydrocarbons in place. They eat those hydrocarbons and turn them into hydrogen. We use all of the existing infrastructure in the field to produce the hydrogen. We have Eco2, which we use these microbes. They take CO2 and essentially convert it into lipids. So one of the things we're doing there is sustainable aviation fuel or SAF with United Airlines. Fun fact, Oscar the Grouch is United Airlines chief trash officer, and I have yet to meet him. On every United call I'm on, I'm like, is Oscar going to be?
Is he available?
No, he's not. Okay, that's cool. I'm not disappointed or anything. And then the third one is biomining, where we are creating bioluxiviants is what they're called, but essentially a microbe slurry that allows us to mine lithium and copper from rocks.
Wow.
Traditionally, you use things like sulfuric acid. They have a nasty environmental impact. And so we're able to use microbes.
I'm very curious about all of this stuff because
I find it
cool. Fascinating.
It's so cool.
So with the gold, what is it?
Gold hydrogen.
Gold hydrogen, sorry. With the gold hydrogen, is there a specific reservoir condition, pressure, temperature, et cetera, that y'all kind of target? Or did you how did that kind of evolve?
Because those are great questions.
The average person doesn't realize how variable oil and gas reservoirs are.
There are certain parameters that we've done first pass screenings in. Our first tests were in certain parameters, and our first commercial deployment or our first field deployment is set to be done in some European fields.
Or is it are y'all targeting
salinity, temperature, pressure? No, we want the ones that have been there.
Yeah, that's
where we have the infrastructure. Because that's what makes it economic. And we have these orphaned wells.
That's the thing. It's a beautiful kind of recycling of the system.
You have the water that's been in there, especially if there's been any secondary recovery.
Yep.
You have water. So we take the microbes, we take food for them too. They pump it down. We take those hydrocarbons, turn them into hydrogen, produce the hydrogen.
I was going to say, and it turns into a gas, which you're also already
Exactly.
producing. And you have all the infrastructure,
right
you
there.
have all the compressors, you have all the safety.
Yep. And that makes the economics really favorable. And one thing, going back to one of the earlier points about the energy transition and energy in general, is there's a lot of smart people working on it. And there's a lot of pragmatic people working on it too. And in order to transition to more of a hydrogen economy, it needs to be effective and it needs to be economical.
Right.
We can't be asking people to pay an absurd premium or to be subsidizing this forever.
Yeah. No.
And so that's one of the things we're doing, is really pragmatically looking at things, just like we're looking at a pragmatic tech stack.
Sure.
If you guys are ever all the way over by the stadium, you can see like our Eco 2 reactors. When you look at them, they're plastic. They're not these stainless steel reactors where everything has to be super sterilized and they're made to be pragmatic and to scale, because that's what makes things economical.
Yeah.
And that's a missing link with a lot of industrial biotechnology. And really, walking through our labs, I've been privileged to give a lot of tours this past week. They look more like the precursors to a wastewater treatment facility than anything else, which is actually great because people know how to deal with things like wastewater treatment. It's a lot less scary than like industrial biotechnology using these hero microbes that were Indiana Jones prospecting. Anyway, the tech stack is in the cloud. To answer, I think, what was your question? We just get to go do these Indiana Jones hunting trips, which is very fun.
And again, like your tech stack is serving like this, your scientists and everyone like internally. There's no like external, you don't
have a web app,
like app or
nothing
that goes out. Yeah,
I would love to SaaSify this.
If it was possible. No, it'd be pretty.
You say that SaaS products are.
You're gonna have me back in 2 years, and I'll be like, "This is the SaaS we built for no reason other than because I've always wanted to SaaSify this." And that is a joke for all purposes. That is a joke. But it's internal right now.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
It's our database has like 70 tables associated with it, which sometimes hurts my brain because it's a lot of tables, but it's really not.
Yeah.
And we have one bioinformatician. He's a PhD. His name is Kevin, and he's crushing it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
How do y'all kind of leverage? Are y'all leveraging any kind of AI, ML, any fun tools, buzzwords on being able to help kind of figure out or project or come up with different ways to kind of use your microbes? Or
I would love to just like gracefully plead the fifth right now and be like,
you absolutely
we are pleading the fifth right now. In terms of coding and doing things like writing Python code faster, I encourage all my team, even if they're just playing around with Python for their day-to-day stuff, to use that.
Yeah.
In terms of AI deployments at scale, I think as an industry, we need to be very clear about when you have enough data to do things like sufficient test train splits. And I think a lot of companies say that they're doing AI and ML when they're really not, or they're taking off the shelf testing splits, train splits, which don't fit what we want to do. For instance, we could absolutely use the genetic information out there and build something around that. But right now, just to be very candid, the ROI isn't quite there.
Yeah.
The tech stack is built. It absolutely has the optionality to do that.
That's a whole feature in mind kind of.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we can build into the roadmap.
Well, so like what is like an example? I'm trying to comprehend. So like I know from our time, right? Like a 1 second DFIT for a month is about 20, 30 megs of text file. What is just like this? Would you say you're dealing with like truly big data?
No, we are not dealing with truly big data.
Most oil field companies aren't, even though they say they will.
But even like big data has changed. I mean, like what was called big data before, and now
and now
everything's
bigger.
But now, like say with like DuckDB, and even like you can process what used to be called big data on your laptop.
Exactly. Or like on your cell phone.
Yeah.
If we could go back to like, the early 2000s, this is huge data.
Right.
The ability to sequence these genomes is massive. If we could just undo Moore's law a little bit.
You just need Hadoop.
Send me the parquet.
This is I'm so proud of our nerdy jokes in this podcast today. This is exactly what
I bet there's going to be like 3 people listening who are like, this was the most hilarious conversation ever. We might be those 3 people when we listen to it. We're going to laugh all over again. The reality is genomes are huge in terms of the ACs, T's, and G's, but it's not like Netflix size. It's not seismic survey size.
Petabytes,
we're not talking petabytes and petabytes of data. Wah, wah. Actually, I say that, but that's a good thing because it allows
absolutely.
to
That's
move
why I
a
asked,
lot quicker.
because if you do have that, then it just becomes a whole monster just managing it and trying to process it.
And the signal to
understand
noise
it.
is so much trickier to work with. Yep.
Bobby and I know that as well. we would have people that were like, no, we want, because you can program the gauges to say record for 1 second for 2 weeks and then bump it to 10 seconds or 30 or whatever.
And you don't need that most of the time, especially if you're just going to reduce the noise or run a smoothing function on it.
We're doing anyways. Yeah. And
well, and that's,
and some of these wouldn't change a PSI in an hour.
Well, it's like, I don't know how familiar you are with that stuff, but it's like
you have that talking point.
Well, you leave it on a well for weeks and it's literally just watching the pressure derivative. And the first thing you do when you do analysis on it is filter the fucking data. And
well, especially if it's a derivative too.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. And so it just makes it worse
because
you get all this noise.
I wanted to see.
And so, or like they would require us to have 1 second, so we do it, and then the minute they got the data, they would email Bobby and say, I can't open this in my
Excel,
my spreadsheet because there's too much data. Can you split it up or sample it?
I really hope you made that into a drinking game.
We automated the export so that they could pick whatever type of aggregation they wanted because Bobby and I were sick of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Fun fact. But
ChatGPT, can you write this form letter so we can just fill in the blank?
Well, I was just like, why not? Like we're doing it so much. It's a simple process to do. But
well, I know you gotta
we're getting ready to run out.
Well, we say that, but the truth is, if left to our own devices, we would be talking about this stuff for 6 or 7 hours.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
We would hyper focus on this, and it'd be like this time tomorrow, and we'd still be like, so let's talk about
there's a ton to unpack
detail.
here. I mean, like, again, there will need to be a volume 2 or 3.
Oh,
absolutely.
Sure.
But you want to get in the speed round? Or
or I was going to...
Or you got one more? Sorry.
Yeah, let's do the last question. What we kind of wrap up with this one most of the time, but what's kind of one piece or some advice that you would give someone either in college, high school, or transitioning over to energy or looking to transition into energy, trying to get into the energy tech kind of community? What's kind of your advice for them?
Just do it. Like, to quote Nike, I'm doing all kinds of early 2000s throwback, whatever it is. If it's cold emailing someone, if it's reaching out on LinkedIn, if it's taking your first Coursera course, if it's applying for a job at a tech company you don't think you're going to get, just make the space for it. Do it. Acknowledge it's going to be hard. It's going to be scary, but give yourself the space and permission to just freaking do it. Because what's the alternative?
That's like, I've been in sales most of my career, and that's one of those things that, like, guess what? You don't know if you don't ask, Exactly. And so, like, people get so timid about little stuff or not. Oh, should I email this person? If you email them and they don't message you back, you were literally back in the spot that you started.
Yeah.
So what is the worst case?
They can say no.
Just tell yourself it went to spam and be like, well, I can still sleep at night.
Right. Okay. No, that's good. That's a good one. Let's dive into the speed round. So we're just gonna pepper you with some questions, just quick answers. I'll let you kick us off.
Well,
we've got to.
I think we know what your favorite cloud is.
We know that.
So I'll skip that one. But what's your favorite database?
Postgres. Run an RDS.
Yeah. Swiss Army knife.
Just great.
Yeah.
Favorite managed service? This is a good question for you because you're very familiar with lots of managed services.
I was going to say Amazon Aurora, actually, because it never used to be very good, but it's gotten a lot better lately.
I don't even know what Aurora is.
It's a database service.
It's a DB.
As a service, like, you don't have to even manage the disk. It just kind of
you
auto
just
sizes
pick
and
multi-availability zone.
And I've heard really good things too about how it optimizes like the compute, like it's able to go real fast. Like
it used to be horrible. I shouldn't say it used to be horrible. It was
really
sketchy
bad.
AF when it first came out.
But no, I've heard really good things about it. I mean, even say relative, because I mean, I like on Azure SQL is pretty damn good. It's a serverless kind of database, but I've heard there's like it'll scale up the compute and down. Fast.
Actually, no, S3. S3 is an object storage, 11 nines of durability, multi-AZ redundancy. You can put anything in S3 and it will be there forever.
Yeah.
Glacier Deep
and what's
Archive.
built off, I mean, you get like snowflakes built on top of technology
so
and like
flexible.
And really every AWS service is just S3 all the way down. We'd always joke at conferences, this is a big laugh. If you're ever in an AWS conference and they release a new service, just say, it's S3 buckets all the way down, like turtles all the way down. Kills them every time.
And who's the guy? He's the Corey Quinn, like he talks about
Corey Quinn and Jeff Barr.
And now everything on AWS is database. Like, CloudFront's a database.
He once, I wrote a blog for AWS and he once mentioned it in one of his weekly emails. And then I met him at reInvent. I have a picture with him somewhere, him and Jeff Barr both. Highlight of my life.
That's awesome.
Again, the 3 listeners that get that.
What about your favorite open source tool?
I'm going to have to say the OSDU energy data platform that is transforming the energy industry right now, led by the Open Group.
Right.
Actually, it's really cool. And I've been really impressed by the commitment a lot of marquee energy companies are doing to stand by it, to really lead. It started with exploration data. It's really gone to the entire value chain. It's been a huge commitment for energy companies, not just to compete on the things, on how their data is stored, but really look at what makes them differentiated. And it's open source is tough and brutal, and they've stuck by it. Like the Exxon Mobil's and the Shells of the world have stuck by it, and that's awesome.
Well, when you're able to put those standards, I look at that like, I think what FinTech kind of put some of those standards in place, and now you have things like Stripe and stuff that were built off that I mean, just enable. But that wasn't possible if every bank had a different API.
Yeah.
But like when you were able to kind of standardize that API that glues the things together, I mean, the software and everything that's going to be able to be built against that is just going to be so much better.
And it was really, when it first came out, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was at conferences where people were kind of laughing it out and like pie in the sky is never going to amount to anything. And it takes one of the AWS leadership principles, or one of the famous Jeff Bezos quote is like, leaders are willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. And this is an example in the energy transition space to be like, do you want to whinge about it or do you want to shut up and do the damn thing? Yeah. And to see the commitment and the support and trying to change it from the inside, that's cool. It's really easy to just complain about stuff in the energy space. And it's cool to see people actually shut up and do something about it.
Yeah. Well, especially around something that we all have problems with. And it's like, oh, our lives would be so much easier if we had data standards, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't work, it's movement in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And we're trying.
Well, I mean, like, and I always point to like Witsimo, like you love it or hate it, but that was a standard. And then companies like Corva and people are able to build off of that. Like, I mean, like people will figure out how to work with it. And and you give them, again, that's why I think drilling is so far ahead of, say, completions 100%. On the the data side, because they had a standard in place that people knew how to build against. Yeah.
I mean, it's analogous to anything else in the tech side, right? Like USB, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Like, look at all the cool shit that happens when everybody puts their egos down and decides a standard. It's pretty crazy. You got the next one, Bobs.
Yeah. So I mean, you talk about security. What about like your favorite kind of security tool or service or?
I really think my favorite security, just principle stuff in general, is just locking your computer and using not the same password for everything. Like keep it simple. Don't make things overly complicated. Yeah. Like you don't need keys for everything. The keys that you plug in, like a USB key for everything, but like don't use the same password. I do use a password manager. It's one that has not been hacked. I love auto-generated passwords.
It's just crazy. I feel like
love 2-factor authentication.
Yeah, well, because like I was very resistant to a password manager for a while, and then I finally started working at a company that required one, and it's like, holy shit, this is so much better. Like,
on your phone,
I don't have to remember what
I had
what
to
it
get
is
a
on
new
my
phone and all the apps in there.
Yeah.
I was able just to like click, click, click.
Yep.
Done.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Or then like, you get those stupid email reminders of it's time to change your password for whatever the fuck it is, and then you can't use the old password, and you're like, what am I gonna do? Hey, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
I only have 2 passwords in rotation. I can't keep throwing numbers at him.
Right. You come up with some like unique variation of that password that you'll never remember again.
Yep. Just changing the character on the end of it. Like,
Yep. And then it's like, you can't use this. And you're like, oh, you cracked my
80% the
system.
same.
Yeah. Or like people start adding, it's gone from 7 or 6 to 8, now 11. And it's probably going to be even higher unless they figure something else out. But
also Liz is awesome is the best password. Exclamation mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For legal reasons, that is a joke. That is actually not the password to any of my stuff.
Yeah, we did something similar with the Netflix password that we share with our family. We basically made them say that my wife and I are awesome. Like they had to type the whole thing out whenever they wanted to use our Netflix account.
I'm gonna be doing that with my sister.
Subtle
in the future.
conditioning.
Yeah. What's your favorite video or board game?
Board game is going to be Dominion with the expansion packs. Play a lot of board game. Oh, I love board games. Dominion expansion packs.
Okay.
Get the last couple.
I actually answered that one quickly and succinctly and didn't go down a rabbit hole. I'm very proud.
No, I just need to go look it up and probably. My wife loves board games, so
good.
All right, I'll just go right to the last one. What's the most interesting bleeding edge tech you're excited about?
Honestly, the stuff we're doing is so freaking cool, and the ability to scale it up,
Yeah.
combining the bioprospecting with the genetic engineering and the laboratory evolution, bringing it into the cloud. I haven't seen anyone do anything like it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlike anything I've heard. So,
Like,
I mean, and for you to be able to drive the direction of it,
It's
it's pretty
really
awesome.
cool.
I mean,
It's really
really
cool.
sweet.
Awesome.
I'm excited about it. Tell people where they can find you and Cemvita.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Liz Dennett, Dennett, and Cemvita is just Google Cemvita. Google Cemvita Liz. I'm the one with the bright purple hair.
Yeah.
There's probably a few Liz Dennetts out there, but the one with the bright purple hair is me.
And all the really informative videos.
Yeah.
I'm very doxable, very, very Googleable.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great content.
I could
So
never
that's
be
why I
a
bring it up.
spy or have like a secondary life.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, shout out to your Medium blogs and stuff too. I mean,
Yeah, thanks.
no, it's really good. So people definitely need to check it out, especially coming out of academia and stuff like that. And I pointed my sister-in-law to those,
Aw.
you know, just because, I mean, she needs to understand like the transition from, you know,
Yeah.
being an academic and being in school to like, this is, you know, you need to
It
be
was
useful. And
It was one of those just do it's. I had an airplane ride. The Wi-Fi wasn't working.
Yeah.
And it was hyper focused. I got in there, and then next thing I know, the flight attendant's like, "Ma'am, you got to turn off your computer." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, frick! It's been like 4 hours. Okay, cool."
Yeah.
So it's always great to hear that. So thank you so much.
of course.
Awesome.
No, thank you for being on.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll see y'all next time.